Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. It's a real pleasure to welcome you. I'm Rebecca Winthrop. I'm the director of the Center for Universal Education here at Brookings, and I know most of you are close friends and colleagues from various important institutions around, so you probably know our work, but the few new faces, we work on education across the developing world, and one of the important themes that we work on is girls' education, and that's what we're here to talk about today. And we are extremely lucky to have the support of a wonderful group, Echidna Giving, who sponsors the Echidna Scholars Program, which brings a range of amazing people to Brookings for a residence and then partners up with them afterwards. And you will learn much more about it to follow, and you will meet our Echidna Scholars, who, on a personal note, it's been an incredible pleasure to have them with us. We've all benefited greatly. They keep saying, oh, this is so wonderful. We're so lucky to be here. And I have to say the contrary is probably true. I would say that we here in DC, not just within the center, but also our broad education community is probably much more greatly benefited than they have. Having their perspectives with us has greatly enriched our work. So let's talk about girls' education. This is a topic that I know is near and dear to many of your hearts. And actually, it's not a new topic on the global education scene. It has been a heavy girls' education movement for many, many years, and there's a lot to celebrate. The fact that gender parity in primary and secondary education made it into the Millennium Development Goals in 2000 was a big deal, and I have several colleagues who were responsible for actually drafting that language. Some of them might have had an influence here in this room, but they did talk about how rewriting the drafts every time they came back to put in gender parity, girls' education, gender parity would get deleted and it would come back and they would put it in. So it was actually a huge accomplishment. And much has been achieved, at least in primary education. The gender gap has narrowed quite substantially in primary education, practically halved. In 2000, there was about 60 million girls out of school, and now there's about more or less 30 million. But that has led, I have started to hear in some corners of our policy circles, and certainly outside our education community, to sort of whisperings that we don't need to worry about girls' education anymore. Gender parity has been, massive progress. We don't really need to worry about it. We can sort of move on to other things, which greatly concerns all of us here at the center, and I'm sure concerns all of you, because we know that actually that's just the tip of the iceberg. In fact, at secondary level, the gap between girls and boys, although it has risen both for girls and boys, the number of girls and boys in school and secondary school has risen over the last 10 years, but the gap has remained exactly the same. There is no closing of the gap like in primary school, where enrollments for girls and boys have risen, but girls have risen much more quickly, and they started at a place far behind. That has not happened at secondary school. And the other thing is that, just enrolling in school and completing school is, as we all know, only one piece of the educational experience. And the real question is, what is this education affording young women in terms of their competencies and skills and sense of themselves and ability to translate their education into labor market success in life and families, empowered young women. We recently did a study here at Brookings looking at learning levels in the Arab world. And it was really fascinating. We found what we talked about. I don't know if we called this in the study. Internally, we kept talking about the boomerang effect. My colleague Elizabeth Steer, who's here, led that. Which is, it's much harder in the Arab world for girls to get into school, but once they compare to boys, so they're behind in just getting into school, so that's their difficulty. But in school, girls and boys in the Arab world, if you look aggregate, it's different per country, but aggregate, girls perform much better than boys. They are outperforming their male peers all along the way. But then, when they graduate school, they have such limited opportunities to get jobs. They are so poorly represented in the labor market. So it's sort of, hard, good, hard again. So this is all to say that there's quite a lot of work to be done on girls' education, and it's an incredibly important issue, Not only because, well, I would say first and foremost because it's a girl's right. It's every girl deserves an equal chance as a young boy, and young boys also equally deserve those chances. But above and beyond that, there's all sorts of good things that happen when you educate girls, as I think we all know. You know, kids are healthier, people live longer, communities and the women themselves are wealthier. Lots of development goodies come with it. So, what we want to do today is really turn the microphone over to leaders in Africa who have been at the forefront of moving the needle on girls' education and thinking about, you know, the steps along the way, not being satisfied with primary enrollment rates as an endpoint. And indeed, I think it's important to note that, you know, now what we really need to focus on is those key hotspots. There are countries around the world where girls are incredibly behind, just in access, incredibly behind boys. There's hot spots. It's not true when you look at the global not necessarily true when you look at the global aggregate averages, but certainly there's parts of the world that needs real attention. And you know, it's clear that we need to start thinking about the quality of education, what social norms girls are learning, linkages to lives and successful livelihoods. So I will turn over now to His Excellency Ambassador Stephen Matenge from the Republic of Malawi. And we are very honored, Ambassador, to have you with us and your lovely wife. He has actually been a very close supporter and friend of the center, and in particular of Madalu, who's our Echidna scholar from Malawi. So we thank you in advance for all your great support over the time that Madalu certainly has been here. The ambassador has been a public servant since 1980, and prior to being ambassador to the U.S., he was the ambassador of the United Nations and the Solicitor General and Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Justice. He's also on the board of a girls' education NGO, Advancing Girls' Education in Africa, that works in Malawi, and we are very thankful also for his work in the sector. So, Ambassador, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me say how grateful I am to Xanthi Ackerman and Rebecca Winthrop for inviting me to join you in this discussion this morning on this very important topic on girls' education. As Rebecca mentioned, I am the ambassador of Malawi. I came here in 2010. Before that, I was at the United Nations as the ambassador of Malawi to the UN. I'm very, very passionate about girls' education in Africa and in Malawi in particular, because I know how important it is to tackling poverty in Africa and certainly in Malawi. Without teaching our girls, without empowering our women, giving them the opportunity to access good quality education, we will never be able to address the many challenges we face in Africa, development challenges which can easily be resolved if our girls and women are properly educated and are given the opportunity to receive good quality education. The issue of girls' education is critical worldwide, but nowhere is it more critical than in sub-Saharan Africa. In sub-Saharan Africa, the number of girls out of school at primary level has increased since 2008. There are now 16 million girls out of school at primary level, and there are 2 million more girls than boys out of school. These are very depressing statistics, and certainly it's a challenge to all of us to see how best we can improve on these statistics. At global level, girls are almost as likely as boys to enroll in secondary school, for example, here in the United States. Yet in Africa, you will find just 4 girls enrolled in secondary school for every boy, and far less in rural and in poor areas. The reasons for this are many. It's a multifaceted problem. Girls face a wide range of barriers and challenges in accessing education in Africa. The most common of these are, most of them get married before the age of 18 years. And this is common in most African countries. The reasons being simply poverty. Most girls born in poor families in the rural areas and in some of the urban areas in our countries are poor. So poor that their parents would actually encourage them to get married at a very early stage. And we see marriages, of girls 15 years, 14 years, and as soon as they get married, the consequences are so obvious. They are exposed to HIV and AIDS. They are abused by their, husbands, who are most often older men than themselves. They are prevented from going to school. They are made to do household chores, fetching firewood, walking long distances to draw water, and sometimes to engage in income-generating activities at the markets, where they face more and more challenges from other men. So that prevents them from going to school. The result is that they will not be educated, and we are now perpetuating poverty even more. And once they get married, another consequence is that they will start bearing children at an early stage. So we see young girls marrying at 14 years of age and starting bearing children at that age. What happens is that then you have health problems coming in. Maternal mortality increases because at that age, most girls are not ready enough to bear children. They are unable to look after those children. Malnutrition sets in, and pretty soon the child will die before the age of 5 years. So we are increasing both maternal mortality as well as child mortality, and then perpetuating poverty even more. As I said, for female adolescents, they are twice as likely as boys to contract HIV/AIDS, again because of early marriages, premarital sex. They're trying to survive in a very competitive and very, very dangerous world. Again, most school environments are not conducive for girls. School environments are so intimidating. Most schools are very far from home. My own cousins in the village where I come from would walk almost about 11, 15 kilometers, which is about maybe 10 miles, to school, to and from school. So every morning waking up at, say, about 5 a.m., walking to school, 15 kilometers, and then walking back home. They come back home, they're expected to, undertake household chores. They're prevented from doing their homework. And then pretty soon it's night. They don't have lights. They can't work in the night to review their schoolwork. And then the next morning again, they should wake up at 5 a.m., make the same distance to and from school. That is so challenging to them. I had to intervene with my wife to take them out from the village and then finding school places for them in boarding school. So, as one way of trying to help them to achieve their educational goals. But for many poor families who have no other people to help them, then it means these girls would have simply been in the village, drop out, because at the age of 15, walking 20 kilometers a day to and from school, sure, even if it were me, I don't think I would manage to do that. Even if I were to cycle, you just have to ask Zanthe Ackerman. I tried to cycle 40 miles, but at the end of the race, I thought I was not going to walk anymore. And this is very, very depressing for most of us because in Africa, 51% of our population is female. And as our president, President Joyce Banda, rightly puts it, she says, 51% is female. And these are the people who produce the remaining 49%. And yet, they are not given the opportunity to access good quality education, good health care, so that they can contribute to national development. So it's a challenge that we need to face and see how best we can provide for our girls and women in Africa, to be able to be, to effectively participate in national development. So how do we move from there? I believe what we need to do is now to look at the type of leadership we need in order to help promote education, in particular girls' education in Africa. Because it cannot just be, leadership or business as usual. We need good quality leadership, a leadership that is committed to girls' education, to women empowerment, a leadership that is, prepared to tackle to make hard decisions, to make sure that girls go to school, a leadership that is prepared to look at what the barriers that prevent girls from going to school, a leadership that is passionate about national development and also development at the continental level. And we are beginning to see that kind of leadership emerging in Africa now. For instance, in my own country, again, citing the example of President Joyce Banda, she is very passionate about girls' education because of her own background, where she comes from. She has spent most of her time, promoting, the girls' education and women empowerment. So she speaks so passionately about these things. So we are lucky that we have at the top a president who is committed to ensuring that we promote girl education in Malawi. But I also know that she is also committed to ensuring that in Africa, we do the same. She is the chairperson of the Southern Africa Development Community. And she has made her position clear at that level, why the SADC region should be in the forefront promoting girl education. In fact, in SADC, we have adopted a policy that, the 50-50 policy. I'm sure Madalo will probably explain that. And maybe at one point my wife too can explain exactly what that means. But we are saying, we must have 50-50 chances for, parity for both men and women, for both boys and girls in school. So we are hoping that slowly we're going to achieve that. As I said, in Malawi, our leadership recognizes the importance of drawing attention to the issues of girl education. We are beginning to tackle the most difficult things that prevent girls from accessing, good quality education. For example, harmful cultural practices, which are widespread, in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa. It has been very difficult over the years to change cultural attitudes towards girls and women. But in Malawi, we are saying, look, time has come for us to tackle these issues. We should prevent female genital mutilation because it's so degrading for girls and women. It prevents them from accessing school. We should tackle what we call fistula, all those things prevent girls from going to school. We should prevent early marriages. In fact, our parliament, changed the minimum age for marriage from 15 to 16 years. The population, surprisingly, was up in arms. How can you only change from 15 to 16? That's a cosmetic change. We need you to change, to make meaningful change that everybody will then accept and then give confidence that we are indeed moving in the right direction. So currently there's a ongoing debate, that whether we should change again from 16 maybe to 18, or even some are suggesting 21. So we are saying let's put the marriage age, minimum marriage age, to 21, deliberately, at least for now, so that we can allow our children to go through the education process, receive good quality education, the highest quality education they can get, and then from there, maybe we can then probably lower it down at a later stage in the future. So you can see we are beginning to tackle these issues, things which long time ago were taboo. We are also using our traditional leaders, because it is our traditional leaders who have the custodian of culture and cultural values. And most of them are beginning to become champions in their communities, to change. We are using, traditional religions. For example, in Malawi, we have one that is called Gule Wankulu. It's a secret cult, that can causes fear sometimes in the communities. But then, as Madaro might probably explain in her presentation, we have found a way of using, that cult to spread the message. And surprisingly, it seems to be working. So we should be innovative in how we promote girls' education in Africa. Again, we need political leaders that are committed, as I said, to girls' education, so that our girls should be seen to have, sufficient political representation, especially in parliament, at the national level as well as at the local government level, to ensure that their needs are taken into account. In 1994, when we changed from a single-party system of government to a multi-party system of government, we had about 4% of women in our parliament. Now we have, I think, about 22, 23% of women. That is not good enough, but at least we are moving in the right direction. And the president is, trying as hard to make sure that, to convince men to give women an opportunity to, to enter parliament. So she has been calling on political parties to ensure that women are given that opportunity to compete favorably with men in order to enter parliament. Because it's only when we have women leaders at high level in decision-making positions that will then be able to, ensure that, issues concerning girls and women, the gender issues, are properly mainstreamed in our national development agenda. Again, we need leaders who are able to advocate for increased financing for girls' education. Using an example of Malawi, we are deliberately increasing our education budget to make sure that we build more schools for our girls. We are now beginning to think that maybe it's necessary to have specially designated schools for girls, Sunday schools, throughout the country. Right now we have one, I think, public school, Sunday school, dedicated for girls only, and a few others run by faith communities in Malawi. Again, we are working with our faith communities, Christians, Muslims, and others, to promote education. After all, education in Malawi was first introduced by missionaries from Scotland in the 1800s. So we have seen value and, in trying to involve them in doing this. Right now, the Catholic mission, for instance, are building 2 secondary schools, one in northern Malawi, another one in the center of Malawi, and trying to work with government to promote education. So where do we move from there? I think what we now need to do is to see how best at global level we can all work together in order to promote education. When I was in New York as Malawi's ambassador to the UN, we put across to the United Nations, the message that we need to find ways and means of collaborating at the international level under the UN in order to promote girl education and gender in Africa. and across the world, for that matter. So I'm delighted to see that we have 3 scholars from Africa with us this morning who have been here for the past 4 months, is it 6 months? Conducting research and writing reports on their respective experiences in their countries, Malawi and Nigeria. So we have Dr. Echidna. I think Dr. Echidna is right there. She has been working, I think, on issues concerning girls and how we can help them to, take up the sciences, in Nigeria. And I'm sure her report will be relevant to other African countries as well. So I'm very, very keen to read that report and see, what the findings are. But certainly, science is an area where girls have not done very well in African countries. We have Dr. Judith Annie Walker. I think she has researched on child marriage, and I'm sure she's going to expound on a few things which I've already alluded to earlier in my remarks. And then, of course, we have Madalo Samati from Malawi, who has been working on girls' education as it relates to culture in Malawi. And I'm sure she's going to give us very exciting examples along those lines. Again, let me finish by emphasizing what I said earlier on. We cannot address the issue of poverty in Africa unless we tackle the issue of education for our girls and women. And I would probably suggest also to the Brookings institution that you have brought the 3 women leaders from Africa here. Maybe you might want to consider seeing how best you can, help them to have exchange visits between Malawi and Nigeria, so that maybe Dr. Walker and Dr. Echidna can come to Malawi, share their research findings with us in Malawi, and then so too Madalo could probably come to Nigeria, again share with our brothers and sisters there what her findings on cultural issues are. Because in Africa, we may be from different countries, but what binds us together is the fact that we are African, and our cultures and values are more or less the same. That's why you find, books written by authors such as Chinua Achebe have been read widely across the African continent, and books written by Malawian authors have also been read widely in Nigeria. So I'm very glad that you brought our 3 sisters here to the United States, to share with us their experiences and knowledge on this. With those remarks, thank you very much indeed. I will hand over to Xanthi Ackerman. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much for being here. And I think my first order of business is just to say a few words of thanks. And that goes out first to all of you. In looking at who was coming today, I realized that each and every person here has been a part of this program and helped our scholars and helped us to create an experience for them. So I want to thank all of you for that. I also want to thank Ambassador Matenje. I think there may be no other ambassador and no other embassy that has mobilized so much for girls' education. It is incredible. And the way I can most convince you of this is to tell you that Ambassador Matenje ran an Olympic distance triathlon for girls' education this year. He was the highest ranking official in the triathlon and got a shout out from the announcer. So it was really impressive. It was a mile swim, 40 Ks bike ride, and a 6-mile run. So just to show you that he really cares. And the entire embassy, many of whom are here, his wife Isabel, who has been a senior officer in the Embassy of Gender in Malawi and does work with the UN and in West Africa, most recently on gender-based violence and other things. And also his deputy, Jane, who has done work on girls' education, Jane Nakwanya, and Patricia from the embassy, and all the other staff have really mobilized around this issue, and very much in keeping with Joyce Banda, President Joyce Banda's emphasis on girls' education. So we thank you for that and the support of the program from Madalo and also our scholars from Nigeria. Also, thank you to Echidna Giving for supporting this program and for helping us to create this opportunity for what's now a third group of Echidna scholars who have been with us. And it's been wonderful in this instance to have a group of scholars all from sub-Saharan Africa. And in the past, we've also had scholars from India, Pakistan, from Kenya, Nepal. So we've had a great diversity. I also want to say thank you to our incredible team that's made this possible, to Nagar Ashari Abe, who's here and has done incredible work on this program. We're very grateful. To Leila Siraj, to Dominique D'Angelo, to Marta Aparicio, and to Khalid Fayyad. And lastly, a huge thank you to the Echidna scholars themselves. I think when we think about a fellowship program, sometimes we think we're, giving an opportunity to the fellows themselves, but actually the fellows have given such a gift to us by parting from their families and from their organizations who really depend on them and need them, and spending 4 months here in the cold, which they have told us is really quite an experience coming from Nigeria and Malawi. And they've actually suggested that we move the program to the summer months. So, but we're really grateful because you've trusted us, and you've allowed us to share and to learn from your experiences. So we thank you, and we thank your families, and we thank your organizations who also need you. And we welcome Elekima Akine, Adefunke's husband, who also helps us to remember that it's a family sacrifice to have the scholars here. And so we're very grateful to you for coming to join us from Nigeria. And so just to say a brief word, and then let's turn it over to the scholars who you've all come to see. So Madalo is the director of programs of the largest Malawian nonprofit that does work on education. And I actually met her years ago in Malawi, and it's just incredible to see what she's done. She's been doing this work since she was a college student, where she first got introduced to participatory research methods, and that lit the fire for her. And because she's been in this field for a very long time, she's had the opportunity to work with girls who were just getting into primary school, just in the village, and getting an opportunity to start getting a scholarship and getting into school. And now these girls are actually going to university, and Madalo is still with them and still mentoring them and finding ways to make sure they succeed no matter what, whether it's finding a way to get them a laptop, finding a way to make sure they're trained, or mentoring them in participatory research methodology. And so it's just incredible to see her passion, and her policy impact is quite incredible. And she actually has been appointed as the ministry's kind of point person here on education issues while she's been in Washington, and is collaborating very closely with them. And the principal secretary for basic education, Dr. Aponyo, came to Brookings and said when Madalo returns, she'll be setting up a research unit to support her work. And so we're very glad to support her in that effort. Adefunke Akine from Western Nigeria is a lecturer at Tai Solarin University, and her passion is really for teaching. She started out with an engineering course of studies and then moved into teaching. And one of the things that she loves to do is work with people internationally. She serves as the state or country representative for several international organizations related to early childhood education, and has really developed her commitment and passion around getting children and girls in particular in early and lighting their fire. And I've learned a lot from listening to Adefunke, and also from her own reflections about what it's like for teachers and how hard it is for teachers sometimes, because they come into the profession and don't always have a strong sense of themselves because it's been hard for them. And so she wants to help build up their own sense so that they can then go on to help girls build up their own sense of students as well. And so her commitment is across many levels. And Judith Ann Walker, who is truly a citizen of the world, and so we've pieced together her background. She's from Trinidad and Tobago, but then along the way, she fell in love with a Nigerian man and moved to Kano, Nigeria, where they had their 4 daughters. And she co-founded the Development Research and Project Center there, which is a research and implementation organization, but it also is a capacity building organization, and it's a hub and a node, and it allows many other organizations to grow and to build in a place which is incredibly difficult to work. She is also an Ashoka Fellow, a former Ashoka Fellow. And our organization has received funding from Ford and USAID and many other organizations as well. And then on top of all of that, we actually know that she's an incredibly good cook, has made very wonderful treats at our team gatherings. So she's got many talents that we've enjoyed. But her commitment has been tying together her work on child marriage and education. And one of the things that she has helped to really deeply illustrate for us is around girls' education and how much deeper we need to look at the issue. We need to look far beyond girls' education and look at the different layers and how they come in context. And in the context of West Africa, how much child marriage is really at the heart of the issue. And she'll talk to us about that today. And in both Judith Ann and Adefunke's case, we know the policy impact is going to be great. Adefunke's been in touch with the Office of the Presidency and the ministry throughout the course of her research, and she'll be looking to go home and do work in her university and then beyond. And Judith Ann Walker just returned very late last night. Thank you, Judith. For traveling in the storm to come back to where she was presenting at the Open Working Group meeting up in New York at the UN on the importance of education being included in the post-2015 framework. So I will turn it over to Madalu, who will first present to us on her research findings in Malawi.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Echidna for giving me this opportunity. It's a rare opportunity for a grassroots worker, a village girl like me, to stand in the global world and talk about the issues that we are dealing with at the grassroots. I think to me, it's a great honor, and that's why I really had to commit myself and learn a lot in my time here for the benefit of our people in Malawi, especially the people at the grassroots. And also thank you to Malawi government for the support. It's overwhelming to me. And I'm so enthusiastic to go back home and share with the ministry, because everybody, I've been talking with the directors of education, secondary education, the director for planning, and all they are saying is we are looking forward to the work that you are doing there and see how best we can, make a paradigm shift in the way of doing things towards achieving girl-child education in our country. My journey starts about 20 years ago as a student, an undergrad student in Malawi. There was a big girls' education program, and I'm honored to have the architect of that program here, Mary Han, and getting involved as an action researcher, going in each and every community in the country, and how appalling it was to see the plight of girls. And that's what drove me, that there's need to do something as a nation to support girls. I remember getting in one village where the most educated girl had gone to grade 4. That was the most educated. And when they saw us, as students, that time we were around 18 years of age, and thinking that we had not yet had children, and we were not yet married, they were shocked. So this is what drives me towards girl-child education. So in my work, this paper is a reflection of the work that I've been doing for the past 20 years or so, and being here and learning and reading from other research work. And this is what I've concluded, and this is what I want to share with the policymakers and our people when I go back home. And what is it about? It's the interface between policy and what is really happening on the ground. And my focus is looking at culture. So my paper, I will take you through to discuss, first of all, what the problem is and which is the disconnect that is there between policy and what's happening on the ground. Then from there, I will use the readmission policy as one of the progressive gender equality promoting policies that we have in the country to showcase the disconnect that is there between the policy and the practice on the ground. Then lastly, the proposal I'm making to the government of Malawi to strengthen partnership for adolescent girls learning in the country. First of all, let me share the fact that as a country, there is huge and amazing political will. In terms of policies, we have very good positive policy framework on the ground. From early 90s, 1993, readmission policy that allowed girls, pregnant girls, to come back to school. Before that, no girl could come back to school. That was expulsion. Then we had the Gable program at that early age that set the impetus for girl-child programming in the country. Free primary education in 1994, reducing costs of schooling, and then uniform was no longer compulsory in primary school. Community involvement in whole school management. We realized that there's need for community to get involved to make the change that we want to make. Then we've had scholarship programs to support very, very poor girls. The National Education Sector Plan has access and equity and a number of interventions within it to address gender inequalities in education. Recently, we just passed the gender equality law that criminalizes harmful social cultural practices that we have in the country. Our MDG accelerated framework focuses on girl-child education in order to address the lagging gender-related MDGs. So as you can see, as a nation, we are very much aware and quite progressive to make the change in development through targeting girl-child education. But then, looking at our statistics, it seems we are not making progress because the participation of girls in education remains a huge challenge. We have achieved gender parity in primary education, as you can see from there, almost 100% at grade 1. But then when we get to the upper primary, half of those girls are out of school. At completion, very few only complete, 31% of those girls. And only 22 transition to secondary school. Then 7% complete. It's a very pathetic scenario. Very pathetic. Now, there's also a divide that is taking place between the rich and the poor, the urban and those that are living in the rural area, male and female. 85% of Malawi's population live in the rural areas, and over 60% of Malawians, they are living in poverty. Now, being rural and poor and female has a triple handicap. And that's why only about, for females living, for girls living in the rural areas, it's only about 3.8 years of schooling. That's it, on average. Whilst for the richest, it's about 9.5 years of schooling. What is the problem? And this is where my research is hinging on. I realize that there are also other barriers to all this. But my focus is looking at cultural barriers playing a role. And it's a subtle hindrance to education in our country. At the community level, Malawi is a communal society, and we have tribal chiefs. And each Malawian is attached to their tribe and their way of doing things. So traditional leaders are very powerful in Malawi. Not only that, but we also do have institutions initiation institutions that graduate children into adulthood. Now, looking at what is happening on the ground at that level, there is a disconnect because at the grassroots, the value is placed on childbearing and on marriage, and the playing of reproductive roles and community roles by the girls and the females. While at national level, we have these policies that are talking something different, that girls should go to school and that they can also do a good job in terms of being, economically empowering themselves and empowering their households. I want to say here that there are two issues, the positive aspect and the negative aspect of our culture that we need to address as a nation. First of all is the fact that culture is very powerful, very dynamic, and very appealing. Secondly is the fact that there are also issues of harmful gender scripting that are taking place in our cultural institutions that make girls and women remain subservient and think that education is not very, very important. Their priorities are set towards marriage and childbearing. At the school level, we are seeing those gender stereotypes being reinforced at that school level, so much so that even when the girls are encouraged to go back to school, for example, when they get pregnant, but the school environment is hostile to these girls. And there is a permissive culture that allows or tolerates school-related gender-based violence. I mean, growing up in Malawi, I know what I'm talking about. I endured a lot of harassment from boys. I remember this, I'll never forget, being beaten up by a boy because I was smart and I did very well, and he was not happy about it. So he took an argument and then he fought me. He beat me, and I was really beaten. So these are the experiences that girls go through on a day-to-day basis in the country. Unfortunately, there are no reporting mechanisms at that level, at the school level, to report gender-based. It's permitted. Then at household level, that's where now we see all the beliefs and practices being emphasized at that level. And the priority for education is set on the boy child more than on the girl child. So much so that when the girl gets pregnant, it is automatic, or the next option for her is marriage. No more going back to school. And that is why, in terms of pregnancies, when the girls get pregnant, all they think of next is marriage. So half of the girls that get pregnant will never enroll back to school. Studying the readmission policy, there are lessons that I learned to better align the policy in addressing culture. Number one is the fact that there's need to, this policy what it did was to reverse the practice of expelling girls from school because of pregnancy. And it was accompanied by the Gable program that had a social mobilization campaign component that worked with parents. And the message was girls should go to school. And when they get pregnant, they can come back to school. Number two was the fact that pregnancy is indeed a barrier for adolescent girls' education in Malawi, because over 40% of dropouts for girls are because of pregnancies. This is a story of Mary, a girl living in the village in the southern part of Malawi. At the age of 10, she underwent Chiputu initiation ceremony, and upon graduation, she was told to have sex, practice sex. At the age of 13, when she matured, she was also advised to practice sex as a graduation activity. And because she had matured at that point in time, she got pregnant with a fishmonger in the village who never got, obliged to support the kid because, he was married and he was actually doing a social obligation to graduate Mary into adulthood. At that time, I had met her. She had dropped out of school at the age of 16. She was in grade 6 at that point, and her baby was 4 months old. These are some of the stories that we find when we get into the villages. In her camp, there were 22 girls. Within 2 years, 61% of them were pregnant, had dropped out because of pregnancy. Within 2 years. And 5 of them had married. These are the issues that I'm trying to put across, the paper is trying to put across to the government of Malawi, that we must address for the policies to take action. However, I want to say this, that our culture has also very positive aspects. It's very powerful, it's very dynamic, and it's very appealing. So much so that we have to use these conduits to make a difference at the grassroots level. So this is an example of a Gule Wankulu dance, masked dancers, masquerades, that we have in the central part of Malawi and in a few other parts in the southern part of the country. And when we work with them and desensitize them and orient them, they have been seen to support girls' education, fundraising for their schools, supporting girls, getting children to school on a daily basis. As you can see here, this was a fundraising, a festival that was happening in one of the schools. And not only that, the initiation ceremony that I talked about, Mary, because of working with the initiation counselors, the initiation institutions, Mary, as I'm talking to you now, is back to school. So this is the good story I want to put across, that when we work with these cultural institutions, when they own the policies, they understand them, change is going to happen, and it's very dramatic. Because working in these communities for just 1 year makes a huge difference. Lessons. Number 1, build greater community ownership and local capacity to critically examine cultural practices. And I'm proposing to the government that we must establish village change agents in each and every village of the country that will facilitate and spearhead dialogue at village, each and every village, because I cannot change the village. I can only change my village. No government officer can change the lives of the people and the way the people think. So we need to get to each and every village, let them identify somebody who becomes the change agent at that level, and on a regular basis, they sit as a community to discuss their issues, including cultural values and practices that are impinging on the rights of girls and the rights of women in their community. And we have seen it working in our country. Number 2, the engaging of informal institutions and the traditional authorities is also key. Nothing can happen unless the traditional chiefs authorize it and approves it. And that's why these village forums must be linked with have the support and the political will of the chiefs, because they are the custodians of culture. Number 3 is to include girls' voices in the implementation of the policies. Their readmission policy has not gotten any feedback from the girls. What are the challenges they are facing for the pregnant girls? How are they failing to go back to school? There's nothing like that. So my proposal is that our policies must ensure that girls' voices are included in the processes. Then, effective implementation of plans and monitoring and evaluation. The readmission policy had no implementation plan. It has no monitoring and evaluation plan. And the EMIS, the information that we collect for education, has no link into collecting issues of readmission. For example, how many pregnant girls and how many have been readmitted, and all sorts, of dynamics related to the data in regards to this policy. So my proposal is that we need to develop a participatory gender-sensitive monitoring and evaluation plan for the country, and also develop girl empowerment indicators. Then number 5 is to invest in resources to support the policy. My proposal is we just need a starting point. When we build the capacity of village change agents, we have built it, that's sustainable, it's forever, because these are in the community. So all we need now is the funders to divide and share. Where are you going? Which villages and which districts? And how, and from there, that's it. Because the communities will be mobilized to support their girls, to support their women. These are issues that are already happening according to the research that I've done in the country, and even in my work as in CRECOM, this is already what is happening on the ground. So when you talk of scaling up, we just need to share the villages, empower the local people, then bring down the policies that are there, and let them sit down and review their practices and ensure that girls are in school. Not only that, but also combine this with economically empowering the women. Because we have noticed that when we empower, even research has shown this, when we empower the women, they will educate their girls. And we have seen this happening. That's a new way forward, the proposal I'm making to the government of Malawi. The message is, we just need to do this. We just need to do this. We cannot keep on depending on other people to change our world. We have to change it ourselves. And how do we change it? It is by empowering the local people. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention. Okay, you do it.
It's been 4 months that we've been here, and it's really a great honor to stand before you this morning to share with you, as my colleague has said, what we've been working on in the past 4 months. Quite a lot of things has been done concerning girls' education, particularly even in Nigeria. I live in the western part, and access is almost 100% for both boys and girls in the area in which I live, unlike the north. And as I said, living in the western part, one of the things that we have found out is girls are in school, boys are in school, but what exactly are they learning? I am passionate about girls, and I've been working in this classroom. And working in the classroom, I found out that one area in which girls are still not achieving is in science. So my work actually is on enhancing girls' participation in science education in Nigeria. As Zante said, I trained as a food scientist, but as fate will have it, I married a pastor, and we were told to go and start a church in a place called Ibadan. So after some years, we started a school, and I was asked to start the school. So that's my journey into education. And because I did science, and in our government, if you want to start a school, you must either be a teacher or a nurse. So I had to go back to school to learn about education. And that was 1997. I started a school that belongs to the church, and these two girls happened to be one of the first set of pupils that we had. The one in pink, Mayowa, graduated last year as a computer engineer. And that picture was actually taken after we had what we call the valedictory service in the school. I called her to come and talk to the children in the school, to come and share our experience, because there are two girls from the same family and both of them are studying science. And she actually related her experience to the kind of positive influence that we had on her when she was with us. The second picture shows the group in which I happen to be the president for the past 5 years. It has been my pleasure to organize a teacher's workshop on the 5th of October every year. And this year, because I will be here, I had to make sure that the workshop took place. In fact, I told them they should postpone it till next year. But my other team members said, no, we will do it. You don't need to be afraid. And that's the picture of the workshop they did for teachers in Ibadan. As I said, my work is on science. In my research, looking at the papers that I read, there was this statement made by the Director General of UNESCO in 1999. That was 15 years ago. And he said, on a worldwide scale, science is still a man's business. And I want to say, 15 years after, we still have that. He said this situation is no longer acceptable. That was 15 years back. And I'm still saying, today, it is no longer, we can't tolerate it. It is not even a matter of whether it's acceptable or not. We have to do something about it. He said, this is not acceptable because economically, we're not using the resources that we have. The ambassador has told us in Malawi, they have 51% female. In Nigeria, we have 49%. And throughout the world, it is said that women make up half of the population. So if we don't engage women or girls in science, then we're wasting resources. Says, humanly, it is unacceptable. Intellectually, it is unacceptable because we are not tapping into the creativity and the ideas and the knowledge that the women can bring onto to the table. This was what Federico Mayor said 15 years ago. My paper, as I said, has been a review of various literature. And looking at best practices, there are some countries that have been able to close the gender gap to encourage more girls into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, as it's called STEM. And so I've looked at these various papers, and I'm going to be talking to us basically on this point, science as a bedrock of development. We all know that without science, the world is a better place now because of science and because of innovation technologically. And so we all agree with us that if we want the developing countries, especially Nigeria and all other African countries, to actually develop and meet us up, then they must do something about science education. Why do we need women in science? If half of the population is women, why should we not involve them? Then the statistics, what the global statistics says, and some of the reasons that have been put up for this gender gap. So looking at those reasons, then we'll be able to know how can we help to close the gender gap, and then my recommendations. You all agree with me that we cannot do without half of the population. For us in Nigeria, women are important. 49%, we can't just close our eyes to it. So women were critical to the development of our nation. And as I said earlier on, science is a basis for development. One of the things that I've come to learn about is the learning metrics. And I was so happy to read that within the 7 domains, science and technology happens to be one of it. And I was actually asking Kate at some time, why did you put science? If you look at the diagram, if you had opportunity to read it, you'll see that they put science and technology at the baseline. And I was asking, why did you put that? Though she said they just did it. There was no reason. But within myself, I say, right from birth, right from inside, you need science and technology. It is the scientific knowledge that makes us to have safe delivery. So science is all round, whether in the classroom or even when mothers are pregnant. So science and technology happens to be one of the domains in which they say students or pupils who are in primary school should have competence in. The country where I come from, they do not really understand the importance of women. Why did I say so? Last year, there was a policy on science and technology. And in looking at that policy, there's no mention of how to engage women in science and technology. The policy was launched last year in Abuja. All it says that we will encourage, we will have science and technology, but how do you encourage? How do you empower? How do you get more girls or more women into science and technology? Nothing was said about that. This is just to reaffirm what I've said. When we don't involve women, we're wasting human resources. For us in Nigeria, it is on record that over 60% of the agricultural work is done by women. And I can see Judith nodding because we're both there. And so if we do not include them in science education, what they produce, like in the northern part, they produce a lot of tomatoes, vegetables, and all those, but it goes to waste because there is no processing. There is no way in which we can keep them, we can store them. And so after some time, there'll be no food again, and we have to keep buying, and things get expensive. So if we have women in this sector, then their knowledge of science and technology while they're in the school system will go a long way to help them with their work. Globally and in Nigeria, women are underrepresented in science. I just want to let us see the statistics. This was done by UNESCO, and, it was done by UNESCO, and we have 17% for Nigeria, that is female researchers. It is even under the average. The average is 29. Some people might wonder what happens to the 34% in Africa. Lesotho and Cape Verde are the ones that made that percentage to go up because with them, they have more women in higher institutions. When we have women in the university, in my own side of Nigeria, University of Ibadan is the oldest university. Enrollment has increased. We have 42.6% of women in that university. But in science, you'll see that the female students are underrepresented, and in technology and engineering specifically, they're 16.4%. And even when they come into the university, what they do is they go into the life sciences. We're still talking about gender stereotypes. Why do they go into life sciences? Because they believe that they must take care of their family. So they tend to become doctors, to become nurses, you know, those roles that the society has put and say it's the feminine roles that they must find themselves in. In reviewing a lot of literature about why are we having underrepresentation of women and girls in science, there's this term that we came about, and it talks about this underrepresentation as a leaky pipeline. And looking at it, when you see when your tap is leaking, you don't know how much you are losing until you put all together in a bucket. It's just going drop by drop. So you see from that pyramid that at the primary school, science is a basic subject. Everybody comes in. But as they go on secondary and in university, the leakage goes on little by little, and it becomes a major problem. I did a research 3 years ago, and in working with 10 schools, I found out that this disparity actually sets in primary school. And this is the focus of my paper, that all efforts that we're making to close the gender gap is too late. We wait till secondary school or to university. We should start at the primary school. At the upper primary, primary 4, primary 5, primary 6, grade 4, 5, and 6, that is when girls start getting disinterested in science. This study by in the US by 116 scientists actually traced 65% of their disinterest to their activities in school, before middle school. So I'm saying that we should target girls early. We all know the research on the fact that there's higher return on every dollar we invest in early childhood. So early childhood is between 0 and 8. 8 years, children are in primary 4 or primary 3. thereabout. So we should spend more money to engage girls in science at the early years so that we can have more return later on. And for us in Nigeria, that is the most accessible level of education for now. 44% of this 69.7 transition to secondary school. There are two main underlying factors, and I'll quickly go through one of them. That is the brain theory. I'm sure subtly you've heard that girls' brains are not wired for maths. This is not correct. It is not accurate, even though some people still believe that. But the result from TIMSS 2011 shows that in some countries, and I've added, I think Rebecca mentioned it, in the Arab countries, it has actually shown that girls are doing better in maths and science when they get to school. So that is not correct. The sociocultural content affect us in Africa, but I won't go into all those because Madalu has spent a lot of time. We are all from Africa, and that actually shows itself in what happens in the classroom. I'm a teacher, and I've seen how in the classroom, girls are silenced. Girls are not encouraged. Girls are told, if you are going to do anything, you'll be the one to sweep. You'll be the one to pack. They are not allowed to even engage in a lot of things within the science classroom. And when they work within a collaborative team, you see the male taking the lead. It's the male students, the male boys that will be the leader. The girls are meant to keep quiet. So all these sociocultural factors affect what happens within the classroom system. And so I am focusing mainly what we can do within the classroom system. I cannot go to the homes to change them, but as a teacher and as a trainer of teachers, I can work with teachers in the university where they will go back and implement changes. My policy recommendations is in two forms. One, we should improve data and make it accessible. At this point, I'll say that while here, I had to send a lot of people to the Ministry of Education, to WAEC, that is West African Examination Council, to be able to get sex disaggregated data for this work. And it was really a trouble. It took 2 months. And at the end of the day, we had to pay a sum of money. You can't believe that. That is what happens back home in Africa. Well, I'm not sure of Malawi, but in Nigeria, that is one of the problems we are facing. So one of the main things I want to bring to the government is that they should improve our data, our quality, and make it accessible for researchers. Because as Queen Reina of Jordan said, when we have data, we can track progress. We can measure development. But when we don't have data, then we don't even know what we are doing. We cannot, actually see the problem. Secondly, we have some initiatives that are good in Nigeria. And these initiatives are actually what people do, organizations, they get involved to encourage more participation of women in science. But for me, they do not necessarily target girls. And they start at the very top level. They go to the university. They give scholarships. It is only those people that can pass that get scholarship. Already from that leaky pipeline, you see, the girls are already out of the classroom, out of science classroom. They are not even there. So if you focus only on the ones that are there, we'll keep having underrepresentation of girls. So if we want to have more girls, then we should go to where they are disinterested. We should go to where their interest can actually be found, which is at the lower level. So I'm suggesting that all these various forms of initiatives that have been done that are well should go back to the grassroots or the lower level of education. We have partnership. We have World Bank. We have a lot of organizations that are helping us, but they are all focusing on the higher education and post-basic. And for the World Bank, it was so disturbing to see that even in their program, 59% boys benefited. So you see, girls are still not part of what they are thinking of. So the other aspect of my recommendation is what I plan to do when I get back home to engage girls in science. And one, mentoring has been said to be very effective when it comes to girls' education. So I intend to work with scientists, professional bodies, to make sure that they engage girls and they should serve as role model. They should serve as mentors, both to the girls at the secondary, at the primary, at the university, and even to science teachers. Secondly, is to inculcate gender sensitivity training into our curriculum in the school system, in our university. I intend to work with our university. Zante mentioned something, my experience in the classroom as a teacher. You'll see that most science teachers, especially back home in Nigeria, we have more female teachers at the primary school level. Some of them are there teaching that subject, not because they really want to teach the subject. A classroom teacher in primary school teach all subjects, whether you are good in maths or not. So you see these female teachers, they are not so good in maths and science, and they are made to teach this. So you can see the transference of their biases. So my recommendation is the students that we have currently, especially those in the final year student, let's talk to them, let's train them, let them see all these issues that are come to play in the classroom system and see how we can build their capacity, how we can build their confidence so that they can be better teachers, they can be change agents, and they themselves can go back and be positive role models in their classroom. The last but not the least is the piece I'm bringing into this research, and that is bringing stories into science classrooms. Stories, we are told that girls are verbal thinkers and they have verbal skills. Nigeria likes story, Africans like stories. So building on oral tradition, I want to see how we can use our local stories to teach science concepts. And if you read in the paper, there is a story that has been developed that actually needs to be pilot tested. Together, we need to look at engaging girls holistically, not just in one way. We need to look at the data, we need to look at the classroom practices, we need to look at the teachers, we need to look at other initiatives and bring everything together so we can encourage more girls in science. I'll conclude by telling you the story briefly of these two young, well, one is young, the other person is old. Yes. The professor there just received an award from UNESCO. She teaches physics in University of Nigeria, Nsukka. And her story goes like this, that when she became the dean of the faculty, she was the only female there. And in her tenure, she made sure she employed more female lecturers in science. Not only that, she encouraged more undergraduate students to pursue science. And as soon as they get into physics classes in her class, she mentors them. And this year, she was given an award. Madalo says something. Africans can only solve their own problems. We can get help from international bodies and agencies, but we need local people. We need the leadership there, and that is our cry. When you empower the local leadership, we can do a lot because the people can identify with us. They can see us. They will not see you as foreigners, but they will see this is my sister, this is my colleague. She can go, she has gone through this, then I can go through it. The second person is a young girl. She's under 30. That is Ola Orekunrin. She's a doctor, she's an engineer, she's an entrepreneur. She had an experience when she came home from the UK. Her younger sister died because they could not access ambulance, air ambulance. She was a sickle cell anemia patient, and she had a crisis, and they had to wait for 12 hours to get an ambulance. So that spurred her to get into sciences and to get into engineering. Now she has this outfit in Nigeria called the Flying Doctors. She has helped over 500 people. And what does she do? They have an ambulance, air ambulance, and she goes to where there's crisis, especially in the oil and gas industry, to pick people that needs medical attention, and she makes sure that they get the medical attention. I'm saying we should engage girls in science early, and all this will take collective effort. Thank you.
Good morning again, and thank you for this opportunity to share my journey over the past 4 months, and at the same time struggles to come to terms with data and interpret a local problem in a global context. The focus of my research and study over the past 4 months has been on a simple question, and that is the question of why ending child marriage cannot be an education goal in West Africa. The concern is about West Africa. I am passionate and committed to addressing the issue of child marriage. Why? Because in my environment in northern Nigeria, I work across the sectors of girls' education, girls' health, and ending child marriage. And I see the relationship between all of these sectors and issues. For me, ending child marriage can be achieved through girls' education. Yes, there are many other ways it can be done, but girls' education is effective, and it works, and it's also cost-effective. So this is my thinking, this is my life, this is my realization, this is my passion. Unfortunately, I'm a minority. My views are minority views. The majority views are the views that the ambassador told us about this morning. Societies sanction, and they do not think that there is a problem with child marriage. Child marriage is approved, and if you want to say end child marriage, you are a problem. Not only societies, parents, traditional leaders, and very interestingly, in northern Nigeria, the state is involved in marrying off girls as young as 14 and 15. In this photo before you here now, this is a mass marriage program that has taken place in Kano State, where girls as young as 14 and 15 are married off by the state. The state pays the dowry, the state gets the husband, and matches the girls, young girls, to these husbands, many of whom are as old as the girls' fathers. The women you see in the background are women I mobilized to come in and do a pregnancy prevention intervention, largely to give information so that these girls do not become pregnant and contribute to the burden of fistula in the world. This is a tide, this is a movement, this is an activity in northern Nigeria that is taking place across the states that, as try as we might, we are not able to stop it as civil society organizations and activists. So our intervention has been impact mitigation, information, education, and empowerment by giving funding so that the women, the girls, can become active and generate income at home. So this is the local reality. This is the picture of the local reality of young girls being married off and the whole movement of child marriage being recognized and legitimized by government and all stakeholders and actors in the society. So again, my opinion, my feeling, my passion, I sometimes feel peripheral because it's a minority position. This is the majority. But being here, what I discovered from my reading and engaging and participation in discussions is that at the global level, my view is one that is reinforced and firmly believed that ending child marriage, first of all, child marriage is a harmful traditional practice. That's the first point. And secondly, that it can be ended very effectively through girls' education. Keep girls in school is a simple message. They would be away from the prying eyes and the hands of the men who want to marry them, and they will have skills and alternative to marriage. So this is what I've found. I've looked at the literature. There's development perspectives. There are perspectives from the human rights point of view, but the message is the same. Ending child marriage can be effected through girls' education, but that's at the global level. Again, the picture at the local level is the photograph we saw. It's the story I just told you about. So there's a disconnect, and it's a significant one between the global and the local level. So my focus over the past 4 months has been in exploring this issue of disconnect, the why, the what, and the how. The simple question that I focused on was how ending child marriage can be an education goal. How can this be achieved? And to answer that question, I did 5 things. The first and most important thing was to really tease out and look at just what is the pattern of child marriage and what is the pattern and the issue of girls' education. I called it a dual or twin crises. There are 2 crises that I'm looking at, child marriage and the crisis of girls' education. That's the background, that's the context. Then I did 3 points of investigation to answer this question. The first thing I did is I looked at the regional level. I looked at regional meetings. I looked at regional discussions on girls' education and on ending child marriage. What is interesting is that when regional actors get together to discuss this issue, they are often influenced by the global community. So UN FPA was very much involved in a discussion on ending child marriage. And at the same time, you had UNICEF very much involved in shaping a regional discussion on the issue of girls' education. So my question there is, to what extent, given that these global entities have this strong message of ending child marriage through girls' education, to what extent, when they work locally, when they work regionally, do they carry through this message? And to what extent do regional agencies get the message and take action and link up these two issues? So that's one point of inquiry. Secondly, what I also did is that I looked at the country level, government officials, bureaucrats. I had the privilege of conducting a research across West Africa for 3 years, interviewing 50 bureaucrats and asking that simple question with a research team. Why is it that you're unable to use education plans and programs to address the problem of child marriage, which is so typical across West Africa? So I had all of that data, came with it here, and I thought this is an opportunity to analyze that data, because that data was never analyzed and never got into the major study for which the research was conducted. So that's another point of inquiry, to ask that question and understand the why and the how. The other thing I did, which is very significant, is that I reviewed education sector plans. All West African countries at the national level do make these plans, which are submitted to GPE, and they get funding to fund their education programs. Their science education programs, their girls' education programs, tertiary, primary, that's how they fund it. So the big question for me was, to what extent do these plans, which are nationally driven, they're not driven by the global space, to what extent do these plans, which are nationally driven, reflect the realities that we all know exist in West Africa? And that was a very important point of entry, and then the analysis came out of that. And finally, recommendations and the way forward. So this is the outline of the study that you have before you now. So the first thing, what I did is that I looked at the twin crises. And in looking at child marriage, the literature is there, it's rich. West Africa is a hotspot for child marriage. There are many regions in the world, in the global south and South Asia, that child marriage is a factor, and we all know about them. But what's different about West Africa? In West Africa, there's a pattern of very early marriage. The average age of marriage in South Asia, 16, 17. In West Africa, most girls, as many as 35% of girls, are married around 15 or less than 15. Significantly also, in West Africa, the spousal age difference between the girl and her husband is as much as 18 to 20 years. So you have a disempowered girl, you have a girl who is married to a much older person, an older man, and she's invariably the third or the fourth wife. So the pattern of child marriage in West Africa is specific and is a very harmful practice. Regarding the crisis of girls' education, in the crisis of girls' education, what I found, 1 out of every 2 girls in West Africa is not in school. And more importantly, in many countries across West Africa, the dropout rates are phenomenally high. In Chad, for example, as you can see, in Chad, it's as high as 75%. So we have a crisis. We have a twin crisis. I've established that. In the paper, I really tried to come to terms with the data and interpret the nature of the crisis. So the first point of inquiry in answering the question of why these two issues are not joined up, I looked at these 2 significant meetings that took place this year. 2013. In this year, this meeting that took place in the Gambia on girls' education focused on the post-2015 agenda. It's looking at how we fast-track accomplishments on girls' education in West Africa and what is the post-2015 agenda. Importantly, in this meeting that took place where all West African ministers of education were present, very important commitments, no mention of child marriage. Also, in the meeting that took place in Addis Ababa on the issue of what do we do with adolescent reproductive health, the opening statement at that meeting was on setting the agenda on ending child marriage. Important discussions, opened by the UNFPA head, no mention of education. So again, separate, polarized silos. But that was interesting. But perhaps the most interesting thing for me, and a discovery when I was able to unpackage all that data I came with in my suitcases, is when I started looking at the interviews that we conducted and the focus group discussions with 50 bureaucrats. And this is one of these interactions of us sitting down with the bureaucrats. And the bureaucrats were very willing to talk. They explained their positions. We had good discussions. And when we asked the simple question, why are you as an education policy implementer not able to use girls' education to address child marriage? These are some of the answers that we got. Very interestingly. One, child marriage is not a public policy issue. For many of them, child marriage was something that happened in the private and the domestic sphere. It's a customary practice. How are you going to make this into a public policy issue? It's a customary practice. But when they did concede that it is a policy issue, that it can be engaged as a policy issue, for them, it's a health policy. It cannot be an education policy. Additionally, what is important is that they made the point that child marriage is specific to local regions. And after all, they are national bureaucrats. How can they be making national policies when this issue and this particular problem is localized? So it's a localized problem. Interestingly, again, what they said is that we are education professionals, we are technical people. We know what is retention, we can calculate it. We know what is completion, we can calculate it. We spent a lot of time developing our skills in that area. How do you want us to start measuring ending child marriage? There are no indicators that are developed on that, so it's not possible. So these are the answers that we got. And most importantly, when we ask questions, they threw questions back at us. So one asked a question, and many of them echoed that same question. So if we are going to implement girls' education programs to end child marriage, does it mean that the Ministry of Health would give us some of their budget? Because after all, child marriage is a health issue. So those are some of the questions, and those are the findings that the research team, came to terms with. But interestingly, the third point of inquiry, the education sector plans. This is what I did mostly when I was here. Read and engaged 13 education sector plans. Translated, some were in French, some were in English, and really tried to come to terms with these plans. Because my assumption is that, okay, if I've missed all of that before, now that I have the opportunity to look at the plans, surely the plans are being implemented in a country and in context where all these people writing the plans know that child marriage is a problem. So I should expect to find that. No. What I found is that in the education sector plans, only 2 countries mentioned ending child marriage as a barrier to girls' education girls' education programs being implemented. So that was the context. That was the broad context. That was only the barrier. No country included any goal or objective on ending child marriage in the education sector plan, even where they had separate sections on girls' education. No country in West Africa, the 13 countries, the plans I reviewed, no country mentioned anything about a goal or an objective on ending child marriage, or linking education with ending child marriage. No country had an indicator, a monitoring and evaluation indicator that had to do with tracking ending child marriage or the contribution of education to ending child marriage. There were only few countries that targeted regions and specific regions where there was a concern that there were high dropout rates and many girls were out of schools. But no region was specifically targeted because there were high rates of child marriage. And most importantly, the plans generally spoke about access. Few of them spoke about quality. Just increase access, not a good mention of quality and focusing on girls. Where plans did focus on girls, about 6 of them did talk about gender components, having more gender in education curricula, but only 6 were strong, 7 were quite weak, and Nigeria in particular, it was my discovery, was the weakest of them all. Very little mention, almost no mention about gender as an issue. So this is the analysis of the education sector plans. So having looked at the analysis of the education sector plans, I just saw a time cue, so I'm going to give you my recommendations. Having looked at the recommendation, having looked at the education sector plans, having looked at the global meetings that I told you just that have taken place this year, having looked at the responses of the bureaucrats, the disconnect that I see exists, and the data shows that the disconnect is there. And it's a sad disconnect, because it's an opportunity to end child marriage and to address this problem. What are my recommendations? I've made recommendations at the global level, so global actors do have a role to play. They are stakeholders, national, regional, and at the local community level. At the global level, GPE is a recommendation, must accelerate the UNGAI coordinated education reforms in the education sector planning process by incorporating a stronger gender component. There is a process that is ongoing to reform the GPE process where the countries make their applications to GPE, and my recommendation is that it must accelerate the reforms because there is need to encourage, I dare say even force, these national governments to take gender into consideration and mainstream it into their plans and programs. The UN Special Envoy has made a very strong statement. He has conceptualized the term policy fragmentation. He said the policies are fragmented. He has done the very significant work on how education can end child marriage. But he said that there is a hurdle, and it is policy fragmentation. There's also agency fragmentation. It's a very strong observation he's made, and my recommendation is back at his office. He needs to take the initiative of calling the big H8, that's the health programmers, the WHO and others together to talk about how these two areas can be linked more closely, how can they work more closely together so that the right guidelines and guidance is given. Currently, the whole message of ending child marriage through girls' education is centered around the International Day of the Girl Child. That's when we get all the messages, the joint statements and the singular statements. My argument and my recommendation very strongly is that this has to be mainstreamed. It cannot just be concentrated on one day. It should be mainstreamed through the agencies and all their activities. Additionally, WHO and UNFPA that are leading the fight against ending child marriage from the health point of view, they need to start working with the education folks and the girls' education folks. There needs to be more closer joining up. WHO is having a meeting in the next 4 days in Switzerland on ending child marriage. It's a big push. There are no education people invited to that table. And that's very significant. At the regional level, there are several agencies at regional level that are very powerful and have a significant role to play. My recommendation is that these regional agencies should do more to build, when I say regional, I mean the West African sub-regional level. They should do more to build the capacity of bureaucrats, administrators, so they don't make this simplistic statement that child marriage is a local issue. If they were better able to do planning, national level planning that recognizes regional differences, there would be a more comprehensive response to the problem of child marriage, because the impact in one zone, one location, throughout the country and even globally will be seen. So capacity building for regional agencies and harmonization. At the national level, it's very important that national stakeholders have a role to play. Adefunke has said it, Madalo has said it. Not just the global space, we are responsible. Policymakers nationally must take responsibility. So the recommendation is that independent think tanks, not those that are aligned to the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education, because these ministries are competing for resources, the officials are competing, and they don't get along. So an independent think tank should come together and bring these competing interests together around the singular theme of how can education end child marriage, how to work it out, the modalities of it. In addition, when they meet, when they have a policy dialogue, when they talk, whatever consensus they come to should be percolated up, and presidential leadership is critical and important. Finally, in terms of recommendation at the community level, at the subnational level, at the level of states and provinces across West Africa, it's important that we conduct research and understand exactly why is it that child marriage is perpetuated, and the initiatives and activities that so many NGOs and other groups are implementing to document them and demonstrate best practices so that governments wouldn't think that the only thing they can do is just marry off these girls. I am of the firm belief that if they see things can work, they will support it. But they are not convinced because we haven't done enough to document and to take the message forward and to show them how it is politically prudent for them to do it also, because that's very important for politicians. I would end with this note. I see my time has run out. I will end with this note. For me, my takeaway from this 4 months, the journey, is that I have seen it as a leadership development process. Personally, this is how I benefited. And this is what I would like to do when I get back home, to cascade the leadership development down to my colleagues, my friends, to people I know who are passionate and who are even better advocates than I am, to work with them, to a group of women in particular, focusing on women, younger women and women who are strategically placed in the bureaucracy, who feel disempowered, who cannot move forward to advocate. This is a photograph of me going on an advocacy visit to the Ministry of Education in one state where the enrollment rate is the lowest in the country, and they just cut the education budget. So I mobilized my staff, we got there, and we were ready to see the commissioner. Unfortunately, he saw us. But the important thing is that when I look at this photo, I always feel it shouldn't just be me and there should be a groundswell of women making noise and moving forward. But to do that, the leadership development component is strategic. It doesn't just happen. I went through a process, and I believe I have to help in taking people through a process, women through a process when I get back. So this is my commitment action when I get back. I will end with the last slide. If I did sound a bit negative and did raise all the problems, this slide is important because it shows that things are happening and they're positive. This is a photograph of activities we've conducted in the past year. This is teacher training in our office with the pretty giraffe and all of that. That's what the office looks like. We do teacher training in that space. When there are inadequate teachers, we also go, oh, Carolyn, you know our office. Yes, when we do teacher training, that's fine. But when the teachers are inadequate, we also go into the classrooms and teach. So this is an accelerated learning teaching program that's going on there. And we also do skills acquisition. One of the photos on the top right-hand side is of training girls to do embroidery for caps. Everyone wears caps, they can generate some income, and interestingly, this is in Borno State, in the heart of where all the insurgency is taking place. So I thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
You can do it yourself.
Okay. Okay.
Nobody's ever worn a turtleneck before. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Well, what we'd like to do is turn it over to you all, our friends and colleagues here in the audience, so you can respond and ask questions. What we're going to do to make best use of the time is ask for sort of crossfire style questions. So if you could please state your questions quite briefly so that we can maximize the scholars' response time. So let's open it up. Please, state your name and please. Let's hear from the floor. You all have been stunned. It's impossible that we have no questions. Corey, please. We'll take a few and then we'll turn it over to the scholars.
Thank you very much for these excellent presentations and this excellent research. I'm Corey Hyman from Room to Read. My question to all three panelists and researchers is about language literacy, particularly in the language of instruction. Room to Read, my organization, has been working in Tanzania and in Zambia on girls' education issues, and we find that the barriers to secondary education are the high-stakes examinations that girls take in grade 7 and grade 9 to be able to progress to the next level. And then in Zambia, the situation is that because the coursework is in English, girls are not understanding at a higher level than boys, and so all throughout their education, they're simply not participating in any meaningful way in the classroom. At the same time, in Tanzania, we're finding that the language of instruction is in local language, but by the time they get to the examinations themselves, which are in English, that they're also not succeeding. So to what extent is lack of understanding in the language of instruction a particularly important issue for girls in rural communities in the countries where you've been studying these issues? Thank you.
Thank you. Some more questions?
Hi, yeah, Rebecca Winthrop. It's a little unfair of a question because I've had conversations with you all about this, but not in much depth, which is where is the role for men in this movement? I do believe in the focus on empowering women, but where's the role for men, and how do you see that in your work when you go back?
Audrey?
Hi, I'm Audrey Anderson with Plan International, and to go off that question, I was curious about the role of boys, particularly for Madalo and your work with transforming cultural attitudes at the grassroots level, and have there been approaches that you've seen that have worked quite well with adolescent boys, and more generally, what have been their responses to these initiatives working to promote the rights of girls? Thank you.
May?
May Rihani, thank you for these excellent presentations. Madalo, a question to you. You talked about the traditional initiation leaders, and I'm very impressed by the fact that you're tackling cultural issues. That's not easy. Do you believe that these traditional initiation leaders for girls would be willing to be transformed, and you turn them around from an obstacle to girls' education to facilitators to continuing girls' education and stopping early marriages?
Sure, the woman in red, please.
Hi, ladies. Noelle Schroeder from Women Thrive Worldwide. First of all, thank you so much for these incredible presentations. I had a question specifically for Funke about the introduction of gender sensitivity curriculum at the university level and for future teachers, and would love to hear more about the successes that you've seen from that kind of curriculum, or the successes that you hope to see, especially in that trickling down to girls' relationships with their male counterpart students. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So let's take a moment to respond to these, and then we can take another round. So Madalo, you had a question about will leaders be willing to be transformed, if you can take that one first. Funke, gender curriculum and successes, and what you've seen or what you hope to see as well. Judith, if you could take the question about men and boys and what's the role. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Is that better? You can hear? Okay, maybe my mic needs to be turned up. I'll also try to yell until it gets fixed. Someone can let me know. Okay, better. Thank you. And language of instruction, I know that's an issue probably for all of you. So perhaps, Madalo, you can touch on that, but others please jump in. So let's start, Judith, if you will, on the role of men and boys.
Let me start with the easier one. Let me start with language of instruction.
Okay. I'm glad that's an easy issue.
You know, one of the challenges for many of us is that there's a mother tongue policy at the primary level and the pre-primary level. And that complicates everything all along the way. And yes, you are right. At the secondary school level, they're not able to make the transition from junior to senior because of language is a barrier. I cannot say that we haven't encountered it. We have. And what we do is that we do intensive training of the teachers so that they are able to train, they're able to teach in English, because they themselves have a lot of deficits. So we work with building their capacity so that they can deliver the teaching. Another thing that we do that we have been told by the ministry is not a best practice is developing materials in English and in the indigenous language, dually. And the ministry doesn't like that. They said it's one country, English is the official language, and they do not accept when we produce materials and we translate materials, they don't think it's a good practice. But it's what we do, and we believe it works. So if you have a textbook, you have the English and you have the Hausa, and then we have audios of somebody reading it to you, and it's a little cassette, and the student can listen, learn, and understand in Hausa. And at the same time, the person emphasizes the word in English that you need to get if you are writing a paper, and how do you spell it, how do you communicate it? So that is an issue. Now, very quickly, men. Yes, there's a very big role for men. Resources are finite, and if you have to divide your resources between working on girls who can die if they get married at the age of 14 and they attempt to deliver, or vis-a-vis boys, many of us in in the development community working with girls opt to continue putting the emphasis on girls. But that doesn't mean that boys and men are neglected. Men are an important part of any advocacy team. If you go with a man or men to talk to the government with men, they listen, because invariably the decision makers are male, they listen. And at the same time, we do have relationships with boys' schools, because you need to. The government will never agree if you work with girls only. They never do. So you always have to have a sort of positive discrimination towards females and girls' schools, but you have to find a strategy. This has been our way of surviving, of the same time saying, oh yes, we have 2 boys' schools. Oh yeah, that's good. You know, that's what we do.
Yeah.
I'll start with the language of instruction question. It's funny to respond to this because there's something that has happened when I was here. But we've done work and research on language of instruction. Malawi had a policy. I'm saying had because of the changes that have taken place when I was here. That language of instruction for grades 1 to 4 are supposed to be in the national language, which is Chichewa, or the mother tongue. And research has shown, I was just 5 days ago at the literacy conference, and there was a presentation of one program that we did in Malawi, Read Malawi. And it has shown that the competence in reading and writing of Chichewa correlated with the competence in English writing and reading, which means that the policy was good, or is good, and working very well in terms of language and literacy for our children. And I didn't mention this, but the statistics learning outcomes are not good. By grade 6, our regional SACMEC testing showed that only 20% of the girls and only 30% of the girls had competence in language, which means that by grade 6, 6 years of learning, 80% of the girls had no literacy competence. Now, what has happened is that while I was here, I've heard that our country has gone back to English as a language of instruction for even the lower classes. It's a concern to me as somebody that has been on the ground and done research on these things. I don't know why, and I don't know who informed policymakers to go back to before 1994 and have language of instruction in the lower classes to go back to English. So I'm here to find out, and one of the key issues I will share with the policymakers that when I go back home is to share these findings from the Read Malawi program, so that maybe we can have some change as soon as we can. And practically, it's also challenging because going back to the classroom and changing the curriculum and all those complications, the practicalities they are not favorable. So for sure, the research paper that I'll bring back to the policymakers will make a huge difference to go back to language of instruction into the vernacular for the lower classes. Yes. Then the second question, in terms of traditional initiation counselors. This is a very sensitive area, and it's an area that people run away from. And I've been daring because I know that if we handle this, we are going to make a huge impact in our country. So indeed, it has shown that when the initiation counselors, the initiation institutions are involved, they can change. That's what we have seen now in our country. And the change is indeed remarkable. But of course, it requires the right approach. Because I also want to say here that there have been organizations that have gone out into the communities and they've messed up this, and the communities have said, go back, we don't want you. Yeah. There was a scenario in one district, Yao area, where one NGO went and messed up because of the approach, and they told them, go back and go to Krekom and find out how they work with us. So approach is very, very important in all the issues that we're talking about here, especially when we're working with communities on such sensitive issues. Yeah. and also getting the traditional chiefs involved, because they are the overseer of these institutions, cultural institutions that are there.
Talking about the curriculum for teacher training, I had actually come across two while here, one used by Latin America, and I actually intend to look at it and study it, because one of the things you need to understand is that when we're talking about classroom changes, the teacher factor is the most important. Even like I shared, I was raised by an illiterate mother, and so whether you have home background or home support, if you have a good teacher, you can turn out right. So, and that's the perception from which I am working with teachers, because they're the main factor in the classroom. When the teacher is good, then the product will be good. So I intend to look at this teacher training programs that I've seen while here, and to see how I can adapt it to suit our situation back home. And as I said, I work in a university where solely all we do is to train teachers. And my university is actually so proud of me to be here. So I'm sure that whatever I suggest, because they are waiting for the result of this research, they will want to adopt it and see how it will work out. Looking at the roles of men, in the teacher training colleges, we have a lot of men in the classroom, but for the primary school, we have more female. It is in the secondary school for us in the western part that we have more male, though this is not the case in the north. In the north, they have more male, even at the primary school, than female. My intention is everyone in the classroom, whether a male teacher or a female teacher, needs to undergo this training, because in the secondary school in the western part, we'll see teachers harassing girls. And when they understand this, they will be able to behave themselves and understand the peculiarities of girls. So I intend to bring all the students together, whether you're a male or a female. And in our university, something happened. I got involved with the gender studies. We have a department which is called the gender studies. And at a conference, I met the director. And the director was having problems or difficulties in talking to people to support his program. And I told him, at the director level in the office, all of you are male. So nobody will listen to you. You are talking about female issues. You are talking about gender issues. All of you are male. I said, so Dr. Alademeri, you need to get a female on board. And he actually took it up and went to the VC. And they had to send him a female staff, because posting, they just take you they look at his bio and they say, okay, you'll be good, you do social work, you go to gender studies. So I said, you can't be talking about gender studies and all of you are are male. Nobody will listen to you because you don't know what we feel. And while here, we've been in contact and with the university, and at least that one step, they seconded a female staff to him. And so I know that working with male, he's still the director, but he wants to listen to me. He's asking me on his suggestion, on his proposal, what do you think, Dr. Echidna, what should we do? So we need to work with men when we talk about girls' education. They are the fathers, they are the leaders, they are the decision makers. But as Madalo said, the approach which we take, when you talk to them and let them see the overall effect. When a woman is trained, you've trained the whole nation, you've trained the whole family. So when they see the benefit, of course, they will agree with you and they will concur. The last but not the least, on language of instruction. As a classroom teacher, well, I see the difference between the public school and the private sector. In the private sector, we do the government says we should use mother tongue from the lower primary, from the pre-primary to the lower primary up to primary 3. And actually, you see people coming in and out of mother tongue and English. But for Nigeria, we do not have a single mother tongue. So that is a major problem. We have Hausa, Yoruba, and Igbo. So if I'm a Yoruba teacher and I have boys or girls in my classroom that are from other regions, using my mother tongue will not be so suitable. But you see teachers at that lower level speaking both English and Yoruba. But when they get to primary 4, his medium of instruction is actually English. In the private sector, we don't have so much problem with children transiting into English and their performance because of the quality of teachers. So when we have that challenge of children not being able to learn or to read, I still think is a teacher problem. I think it's a teacher problem. When we have quality teachers, some of the programs that have been conducted in the North, even in the Edo State, you see a teacher in the classroom that cannot even write her name. But because of political appointment, they just gave the teacher the job. So you see, but when we have qualified teachers, they understand, either through phonics method, look and say, there's so many methods in which you can help children to learn. So I believe it's a teacher problem when we have problem with language of instruction in the classroom.
Thank you. Well, thank you all so much for the incredible work that you have done in this program. I can't believe that 4 months has passed, although in some moments maybe it seemed longer, in some moments it seemed shorter. The Echidna Scholars have worked incredibly hard while they've been here. They've written up their research. This is the publication of their research. It will also be up online. So please do take a copy and please look at the findings in even greater detail than you've heard today. We really value what they've done and what they've contributed to our center because it really infuses our longstanding work on girls' education with this global perspective and the context, very context-specific perspective on what's happening in girls' education, what happens in Kano State, where Judith is working in a context where she's losing students are being killed, teachers are at risk. She's working in the most difficult context. Madalo, where she's working against really difficult cultural constraints and finding change agents and resources in the community. And Adafunke, where she's focused on learning difficult subjects and really a laser-like focus on how we get girls engaged at the earliest level. So bringing all of these issues and greater nuance into our work and into the global community. So we value them and we value your support of the program so much. And our commitment is to continue to build this program and to continue to build the network of scholars. Our recruitment for the program is now open. We value your referrals. The recruitment is available on the webpage. Please send the link forward to the folks that you know who would be good candidates for the program. We also will continue to do our work on girls' education, including with the former Prime Minister of Australia, Julia Gillard, who's a non-resident with our program and has engaged quite a lot with our scholars here around this issue about which she is also passionate. And so we look forward to continuing to engage with all of you on these issues. And thank you so much for being with us here today.